Hey, good morning, fellow space fans. If you can hear me, let me know in chat. At the sound of my voice, everything is theoretically working correctly, but we are once again standing by just under an hour before the second attempt of the SpaceX CRS-19 launch down at Cape Canaveral. I'm your studio host, Das, and we will have Chris Gebhardt down at Cape Canaveral with some remote cameras. And what we're doing here, we're not like consuming somebody else's feed and just sort of putting that up and talking over it. No, this is actually Chris Gebhardt down at the Cape. And we have him near the press site. So what we're going to do is see if we can check in with Chris and look at what our videos seeing today for CRS-19.
All right, and welcome to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'm Chris Gebhardt, the Assistant Managing Editor of NASA Spaceflight. If you'll forgive the sunglasses, it's a little bright out here today. There is really not a cloud in the sky, and it is an absolutely gorgeous day. And I know the question on everyone's mind is the wind. And what is the wind doing? Well, we have some good news for you on that front. Looks like the latest weather balloon data indicates that we have no constraints and that the upper level winds as well as wind shear are, as of the last weather balloon, acceptable for launch today. There will be a couple more weather balloon data points coming in right around now, and then again about 30 minutes to 20 minutes before liftoff, which should clear the way. But as of right now, we're good. But just keep in mind, we're waiting on that final weather balloon data, but so far so good and much, much better than yesterday. So right behind me on the pad is the Falcon 9 rocket. It is a brand new Falcon 9. It is booster B1059, making its inaugural flight. Brand new second stage as always, but a reused cargo dragon or flight proven cargo dragon that will be making its third trip to the International Space Station today. Third and final trip, because the current version of the cargo dragons are certified for 3 flights each. But this version 2 cargo dragons, which will be nearly identical to the crew dragons, only with all the seats and all the consoles and everything for crew interfaces removed, and instead they'll be packed with cargo. Those are actually certified for 5 missions each. And the first version 2 cargo dragon will launch in Q3 of next year on the CRS-21 mission. This is CRS-19. CRS-20 will follow in the first half of 2020, and that will be the end of the CRS-1 or Commercial Resupply Services 1 contract for SpaceX, and CRS-22 with the version 2 Dragon cargo capsule will be the start of their CRS-2 contract flights. So it's a little confusing because SpaceX numbers their mission CRS 1 through 20 through 21, 22, 23 and onward, but the overall contract is also referred to as CRS. So a little confusing, but you know, that's how it is with NASA and everyone else. So if you are watching right now, we are on track for an instantaneous single-second launch window at 12:29 and 28 seconds Eastern Standard Time here in the United States, and that is 17:29 and 28 seconds Universal Time for those of you are in other time zones around the world, and should be a good launch. But again, single-second instantaneous window. If for some reason we do not launch today, there is no launch opportunity tomorrow because of phasing constraints with the International Space Station. Basically, there isn't an opportunity for Dragon to get to the International Space Station quickly for all of the time-sensitive scientific experiments if they were to launch tomorrow. So today's our last day. We would stand down tomorrow and come back on Saturday, the 7th, for the next launch opportunity if we don't launch today. But again, right now, when I walked out of the press site and came down here for the live stream, everything was go with no constraints listed at that time. And I've got the launch audio on, so any updates, just like yesterday, we will be able to pass them along to you instantly. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat section of this live stream on YouTube. Our producer, Das, great man, he did the intro for you. He is sending me all of those questions. So let us go, right? Like, let's get into the Q&A session of this. Send us your question. And first off, thanks to Mark Agan and Roger Smith, our YouTube super chats right now. Thank you guys. Keep up the good work. And like I said, give us all of your questions. I'm going to go ahead and step off camera and zoom in on the Falcon 9, and we'll get this party started, as they say.
All right, y'all, it's Das here. As we zoom back in on the rocket, I am standing by. If you have a question for us, put it into YouTube chat. You can,
alrighty, so as I mentioned, this is the CRS-19 mission
I can pass
for
those on to
SpaceX,
Chris,
their
and we can do a little bit of
19th
Q&A
contracted cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station, and their 19th overall cargo delivery mission to the International Space Station.
But it's apparently
a little bit of history and trivia.
About this, there's actually
one of their CRS flights was the one that experienced the in-flight failure during CRS-7, so didn't actually make it to the International Space Station, but we still say it's the 19th cargo mission to the station, and if successful will be the 19th to reach the station, because one of their test flights before the CRS contract flights actually began, CRS standing for Commercial Resupply Services, one of their demonstration missions actually made it to the International Space Station and delivered cargo. So even though they lost one of the CRS missions during a launch mishap, still the 19th overall, which is great. So again, if you've got questions, like this works best if you guys throw us your questions, even if some of them you think got answered yesterday. If you're just joining us, send them again. Really, really great questions all the way around. And there were a few that I know we didn't get to yesterday, so we're going to recap some of them and hit some of them right now. So what payloads are flying on this rocket was a question that we didn't get to yesterday before the scrub. So there are about 38 scientific experiments riding up on the Dragon to the International Space Station, and 54 scientific experiments that will be coming back from the station on this Dragon in early January. It's also got a couple of external supplies and elements for the International Space Station in its trunk that will be taken out of the trunk and by the Canadian robotic arm, Canadarm2, Go Canadarm, one of the life forces of the station, shortly after Dragon arrives. Dragon is also bringing up, according to NASA at one of the briefings last month, highlighting the battery replacement issue that was going on up at the station in November. NASA did say that this Dragon is also bringing up one of the new lithium-ion batteries for the station as well. Those batteries are largely brought up by the Japanese HTV cargo craft, but again, as of last month, NASA said there was a lithium-ion battery on this Dragon headed to the station. There hasn't been any word on whether on if that's changed. or not, but that's sort of a brief overview of some of the payloads that are going up to the station on this mission. Now, Dragon itself, if assuming a launch today on December 5th, Dragon will rendezvous with the International Space Station on Sunday the 8th, very early in the morning, just before around 5 a.m. Eastern time here in the United States, or 10 a.m. or 10 o'clock UTC time. And after that, it'll be grabbed by Canadarm2 and berthed to berthed to the Harmony module of the International Space Station, also known as Node 2 in NASA parlance. And then very, very shortly after that, in fact, just 24 hours later, the Russian Progress MS-13 vehicle will be arriving at the International Space Station for an automated docking to the Pirs docking compartment on the Russian side of the station. So a very busy 24-hour period for the International Space Station as both Dragon and Progress arrive within 24 hours of each other. And both are actually flying 3-day rendezvous profiles. Just because of the phasing angles for Dragon, today it will take it 3 days to raise its orbit and catch up to the International Space Station. And because of that, Progress also then has to fly a 3-day rendezvous profile as well, or they'd be getting to the station at the exact same time as one another on Sunday. And you can't have two vehicles arriving for berthing and docking at the same time. So they had to stagger and do a longer 3-day 49 orbit rendezvous with the Progress vehicle instead of its fast track or 2-day rendezvous, which is what they had agreed to for Progress at the beginning. So that's kind of what's happening in the immediate run. Dragon will then stay at the International Space Station until about January 6th. That might change by a day or two, but that was the preliminary date for Dragon's unberth from the station and come home date. This Dragon, if everything goes to plan, just off screen to your left is actually the Atlas V with Starliner aboard, and Starliner for Boeing will be doing its uncrewed orbital test flight here no earlier than the 19th of December, with a launch at 6:59 a.m. or about 10 minutes before sunrise local time, so should be a great launch on that day. And Starliner will actually be getting to the International Space Station while Dragon is still there. So not only do we have right now at Cape Canaveral 2 commercial vehicles, 1 cargo, 1 crew on neighboring launch pads, but they will both be at the International Space Station at the same time as each other if the current schedules hold. And NASA did say that, well, SpaceX, I should say, did say that they've already gotten all the information they needed from Boeing and done analysis to make sure that no thruster pulse impingement will occur that will adversely affect Dragon while it is berthed to the International Space Station as Starliner comes into dock and as Starliner moves away from the station after its brief stay. So that's a good overview of like how busy December is. There are also some spacewalks that they're looking at, whether they want to do in December or whether they want to shift those to January after OFT and for Starliner, the orbital flight test, and CRS-19 for Dragon. Another question we had yesterday that we didn't get to, are there any more CRS contract flights for SpaceX after 19? Yes, the final CRS-1 contract mission for Dragon for its cargo resupply is CRS-20, which will launch in the first half of 2020. And then they will move seamlessly into the second round of commercial resupply services contract flights, starting with CRS-21. And they will fly those CRS-2 contract flights out through 2024 at present. And they'll be using the new version of Dragon, as mentioned before. So looks like we got some good questions here already. What's it like to be that close to a rocket when it lifts off? Well, in a word, amazing. It's an experience like none other. If you're fortunate enough to be in Florida, either with a NASA social or just here on vacation, it's very much worth coming over to the Cape, because not only do you get to see the rocket actually lift off, you can feel it physically. We are about 3.5–4 miles from the Falcon 9 pad at Slick 40 or Space Launch Complex 40 right now, and we will feel it. We'll feel it rattling and pounding in our chest. You'll feel the ground shake. The vehicle assembly building behind us will do this weird, like, Scooby-Doo squealing sound as the sound waves ricochet off the side of that building. It is a really, really physical and visceral experience to be standing on the ground very close to a rocket when it leaves the planet. So you can definitely feel it. So yeah, if it's on your bucket list item, definitely make it a priority to get to a rocket launch, either here in the United States, or if you're in South America. You know, Europe launches the Soyuz, the Ariane 5, and Vega from the Gagana Space Center in French Guiana. You've got the Baikonur Cosmodrome, Plesetsk, and Vostochny in Russia. You've got the various Chinese launch sites, as well as the US and New Zealand sites, and Indian sites as well. So definitely, if you're close enough, it's definitely worth attending a rocket launch. Next question we've got here is, will we get a nice landing video today? You won't get a nice landing video from the camera I have, but we will bring you that landing on the stream after Falcon 9 passes out of visual range of our camera. This is a very unique CRS cargo resupply flight in that they are recovering the booster, but they are not performing a return to launch site landing here at Cape Canaveral. The booster will land about 185 nautical miles east of Jacksonville, Florida, on the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship. And the reason for that is that they are testing a prolonged coast and propellant thermal conditioning, or they're testing a thermal conditioning for the propellant on the second stage, and that means they have to have quite a bit of fuel left over in the second stage tanks than they would normally have left over for one of these cargo flights to the station. And in order to keep the amount of propellant in the second stage that they need for that test, they have to burn the first stage longer, about 15 seconds longer than normal for these cargo flights. So that unfortunately means there's not enough propellant left in the booster for it to fly itself back to Cape Canaveral and land. So after the first stage separates, it will do a small boost back burn to slow itself down and aim for the drone ship off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. And it will land there, and SpaceX will, hopefully that stream from the drone ship, as it did with the Starlink mission, will remain stable and live with good quality video as it comes down onto the drone ship. And we do plan on our webcast here that once Falcon 9 really passes out of visual range of this camera, we're going to switch to the NASA TV feed. So we're still going to be able to bring you all of the launch. So you won't, if you want to watch the launch with us, you won't have to be switching back and forth between NASA and SpaceX when it goes out of range of our camera. And we can thank DOS for that, the man behind the scenes.
Reminder, propellant load and launch go, no-go poles open for you by this time.
All right. And they are conducting their go, no-go for propellant load poll at this time. This is a good time to mention that the polls for Falcon 9 are not, they are not audio polls. People are not sitting at their consoles calling out go, no-go conditions. It's all automated. So they're just monitoring their systems and making sure that, and just making sure that they that everything is indeed ready for the start of propellant loading. And propellant loading will start at the T-minus 35-minute mark in the countdown, and then will continue up until about 2.5 minutes before liftoff. So this is the load and go procedure. If you've heard of that, where they basically fuel right up until the moment of liftoff today. So they are monitoring that poll, and we will bring the results of that poll to you, but they're going to be starting to fuel here very, very soon as we head toward launch. There were no constraints as to the sea states or the winds at the landing site for Of Course I Still Love You. That was one of the reasons they scrubbed yesterday, but today weather is much better almost everywhere. So they have not said over the nets or anything that there's any concern for weather for the landing. But again, you know, a good thing to remember here is that even if landing weather isn't great or very marginal and they think they might not get the booster back, if the weather's good for launch, they tend to launch. They are willing to attempt a recovery and risk losing a booster in order to get a mission off on time, which we have seen them do before. Most of those have actually resulted in the booster being recovered. But just bear that in mind, that even if it is really choppy conditions at the recovery site, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll stop the launch. They may choose to sacrifice a booster to get a mission going. Sorry, just adjusting the camera here just a little bit to keep it locked in on the Falcon 9 there. Can Dragon do a direct rendezvous like Progress in 6 hours? No, Dragon cannot. Dragon and Falcon 9 are capable of doing about a 1-day rendezvous based on the performance of Falcon 9 and Dragon and where it needs to be dropped off in a 200-kilometer orbit, and then raise itself up to the 410-kilometer orbit that the International Space Station is in roughly. So Dragon's Cygnuses cannot do the 6-hour rendezvous, but the Crew Dragon and the Crew Starliner will do those 24-hour or less rendezvous when the commercial crew program starts. So that's that. We have another question. Are we planning to send a balloon with cookies just in case upper level winds have something in their plan for this launch? We do not plan to send up cookies on a balloon, but we do have Julia's wonderful launch day cookies here with us today. And they are, hang on one second. And the poll is complete. We are go for propellant load and launch of the Falcon 9. We have no constraints that are being monitored at this time, so fueling will pick up here momentarily. So again, if you're just joining us, fueling will begin, and we are counting down. Our instantaneous launch window today is at, again, for those of you who are just joining us, is at 12:29 and 28 seconds Eastern time, and it is instantaneous, meaning they have no ability to hold for any reason. So if there is an issue at this point going forward, it would be a scrub for today. But again, everything is looking good. There are no constraints right now that are being monitored by the team, and they have given a go for fueling and launch of the Falcon 9 on the CRS-19 mission today. So heading back over to your question, so we got the cookie question down. That's a very important question because, you know, rockets tend to like Julia's cookies, and the people here like Julia's cookies. She's a good baker. So her launch day cookies are always good and tend to appease the launch gods all around. So these are great questions, guys. If you have them, you know, keep them coming. And if you want to, let us... And if you want to, let us know where in the world you're watching this from. We're a worldwide community here at NASA Spaceflight. We don't just cover NASA missions or SpaceX missions. We cover everything from around the world: India, China, Russia, you know, Ariane, Japan, all of them. So let us know where you're watching from and where you're joining us from, because that's always cool to be able to give that shout out as well. So we do have another question here, and I should just stop and mention that the teams, this is very standard, but the teams on the launch console have been given abort instructions. They have not aborted. Everything's still going fine. Propellant loading has actually just gotten underway. If I'm doing that time conversion right, yes, has just gotten underway. We're 35 minutes away from liftoff. And basically the team just gets a standard reminder of like what to do if you need to abort the launch. This is how you do it. If it's urgent, if it's not urgent, things like that. It's a very standard reminder that the team gets. And T-minus 35 minutes and counting, propellant load has started. The Falcon 9 auto sequence has also been initiated and is running. So Falcon 9 is in control of the countdown, and propellants are flowing. The way propellant loading works is that the RP1 kerosene and densified liquid oxygen flow simultaneously into the first stage. But on the second stage, they do RP1 kerosene loading first, so that has started at this point, and runs until about 17 minutes before liftoff, and then kerosene loading of the second stage is complete. They stop that, get that into stable replenish mode, and then they load the densified liquid oxygen into the second stage starting at T-minus 16 minutes. So fueling's underway, everything's good to go. So as that's going on, the countdown net usually gets really quiet now, so let's jump back in and take some more of your questions. So another question we have is, after this capsule comes back from space, what's going to happen to it? Is it going to a museum? That's an excellent question. SpaceX has not actually said what they plan to do with the cargo dragons that have flown their maximum of 3 missions, especially since those cargo dragons will no longer be used for the CRS-2 round of contracts with NASA starting in the third quarter of next year. But that's an excellent question, and we will try to get an answer for you. Probably not on this stream, because I can't step away to go ask a SpaceX person that. But we'll get it for you, and if you follow NASA Spaceflight or myself at ChrisG_NSF on Twitter, we'll try to get that answer for you and get that out that way. Another question we have, why don't rockets ever lift off from the west coast of North America? Is it a geographical thing or just the way that it is? So there are rockets that actually launch from the west coast of North America. We have Kodiak Island in Alaska on the Western Range, and we have Vandenberg Air Force Base in California on the Western Range. And in fact, the Falcon 9s launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base there for polar missions. The West Coast launches are usually used for polar missions because they can't get into these equatorial orbits or station orbits or International Space Station orbits because they would have to overfly densely populated areas of California and the United States and Canada. And unlike Russia and China, which do launch over land, but and with Russia launching over unpopulated regions, and China sometimes launches over populated regions, in the United States we don't do land overflight for orbital rockets. We launch over the oceans, over the Pacific or the Atlantic, and coming up at Boca Chica, Texas, over the Gulf of Mexico. And that just eliminates the dangers to land and people. So we do launch from California, we do launch from Alaska, but those are for polar missions or sun-synchronous missions, of which there have been hundreds of them launched. In fact, the Falcon 9s, to keep this with SpaceX, since this is a launch that we're here for, the Falcon 9s earlier this year in January completed a 10-mission launch sequence from Vandenberg to deploy the 66 satellite Iridium constellation, also launching some spares for that. But that was a huge launch campaign out of Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. But great question, because it does have to do with geography, and that's why there aren't as many launches from California or Kodiak Island in Alaska as there are from the Cape, because most missions either go to equatorial orbits for geostationary satellites, or they go to the International Space Station like this mission today. Another question, is the launch audio publicly available or for press only? So right now it's for press only, but the same launch net that we listen to is the one that SpaceX pipes into their webcast, where you can hear people say things like Falcon 9 is closed out for flight, or Falcon 9 is in startup, or things like that. It's the same net, but it's private to media until the SpaceX live stream webcast goes live. So unfortunately, I forgot I have my phone on speakerphone, so I'm now wearing headphones. So you got a little taste of that, but unfortunately, I can't let you listen to that until SpaceX's live stream is up and running. Another question we have, which is a great question, why is Falcon 9 fueled so close to launch? And that's a great question, because Falcon 9 is a very, very different from all the other rockets in the world, which fuel hours ahead of launch and then sit largely in stable replenish modes on the launch pad while final checkouts are going on. But when that's happening, you're losing a lot of the propellant that you've already pumped in, because the propellants are all usually very super cold, chilled propellants, negative, 170, negative 230 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on what propellant you're using. And as they sit in the tanks, a lot of that starts to boil off and has to be vented out, and then they have to continuously pump more propellant in.
And the Falcon 9 was designed for what's known as load and go fueling, where you lose as little of that propellant as possible, right? You pump it in, you get it all in there, and you complete fueling about 3 minutes before launch, and then you launch, and you've eliminated the need to burn off a lot of propellant instead of actually using it. Falcon 9 also uses densified liquid oxygen, which is a super cold liquid oxygen, and it's just more efficient to pump it in so late and rapidly in the count. So that's why the Falcon 9 is fueled so close to liftoff. Another question we have: how are upper level winds looking? It's an excellent question. So right before we started our stream, I checked in with SpaceX, and they said that as of the weather balloon about an hour and 20 minutes ahead of launch, everything was looking good. So they've got another weather balloon data point in. We're fueling, so that's a good sign. And the final weather balloon data points will come in about 20 minutes to 10 minutes before liftoff. But everything was looking good as of about an hour and 20 minutes before liftoff. Another question we have, and guys, if you're listening, keep sending your questions. Even don't be ashamed to ask any question. With rocketry, there really is no such thing as a as a bad question. So if you've got one, even if you think it might be silly, ask away. A lot of what we're here to do is not just to bring you the launch, but to answer all of your questions. And so yeah, if you've got questions, keep putting them up here. One question we do have right now is how many stages are on this rocket? So the Falcon 9 is a 2-stage to orbit rocket. It has the first stage, which is the stage that has the landing legs and the grid fins that SpaceX recovers over and over and over again for reuse. And then it has the second stage, which is fully expendable. And then on top of that is the payload. In this case, it is the Dragon spacecraft, which will go up to the International Space Station for a rendezvous and berthing on Sunday after it launches here. So great question. It's a 2-stage to orbit rocket. And again, if you're just joining us, this is a brand new Falcon 9. It is not a flight proven core. So it is booster 1059 making its debut flight. And right now things are good. We are about 26.5 minutes away from liftoff right now. About 10 minutes into fueling. Fueling is going well. The countdown net is very, very quiet. No one has spoken since fueling began. And that's a good thing. On the SpaceX countdown nets, you want silence. Silence is good for SpaceX. Whereas a lot of the other counts, it's very interesting because everyone has their own way of doing it. So SpaceX is very quiet. Northrop Grumman is very, very talkative, which is illuminating in its own respect. And United Launch Alliance kind of splits the balance there between silence and chattiness over the net. So it's really cool to see the 3 different rocket companies here in the US doing their thing and how they do it differently. But silence is golden for SpaceX, and they've been quiet right now. So a question we have: why is the camera so far away? You are currently just over 4 miles from Slick 40. That is correct. So we are standing at the press site by about 200 feet away from the giant countdown clock here at the press site, and that puts us 4 miles away from the rocket. We could have gone to the NASA Causeway and gotten about half a mile closer. However, the view from the NASA Causeway, the transporter erector structure, that thing that throws back at liftoff, would completely block our view of the rocket. But what you're looking at here is actually a full side-on profile view of the Falcon 9. So you'll be able to see the TE, the transporter erector, pull back a little bit before launch. You'll be able to see the flash of engine ignition and all the smoke rushing out the flame trench and the rocket liftoff. So that's why we chose to be a little bit farther away than we have been for some other missions. Another good question we have is, what is an instantaneous launch window? That's a great question. So instantaneous launch window in this case means they have a single second in which to launch. And today that is 12, 29, and 28 seconds. So they can't go at 27 seconds, they can't go at 29 seconds, they have to go right at 28 seconds because the launch is timed perfectly so that when the second stage engine cuts off 8.5 minutes after liftoff, Dragon and the second stage of Falcon 9 are directly in the orbital corridor, dead center of the orbital path of the International Space Station. It is much more efficient from a propellant standpoint and a trajectory standpoint to do that.
There is technically a 5-minute window according to NASA and the Eastern Range here at Cape Canaveral, but SpaceX does not take the full 5 minutes. They program Falcon 9's computers for efficiency, and that means a single-second window, or instantaneous window in this case. So that's very different from some of the geostationary satellite missions and the Starlink missions, which have 10-minute launch windows or 2.5-hour launch windows, because there's more leeway time. They're not trying to rendezvous with something in orbit, but because we're trying to rendezvous with the station, it's a single-second launch window. And that is also true for the Progress resupply mission from Russia, which launches at 4:34 in the morning tomorrow, aka about 16 hours from now. It's going to be a long night. Because unless something has happened with Rocket Lab also launches at about 2:30 in the morning Eastern time here in the United States from New Zealand. So it's Falcon 9, and again, if nothing's happened, I haven't been watching Rocket Lab yet because we've been paying attention to Falcon 9, but last I checked, it was Falcon 9 today, and then at 2:30 in the morning it was Rocket Lab, and then 2 hours later at 4:34 in the morning it's Progress launch to the station. And that Progress launch to the station is also a single-second instantaneous window at 4:34 and 11 seconds. So it is quite common to have those instantaneous windows for the International Space Station. Another great question, are there international rules for space travel, i.e. do all vehicles orbit in the same direction, or is it Thunderdome up there? So it is not Thunderdome up there, but they do not all orbit the same direction. Some are in retrograde orbits, some are in polar orbits, some are in northeast to southeast inclined orbits like the International Space Station, some are in geostationary transport orbit, but we do track all of them. The Air Force here in the United States does track all the objects that are big enough to be seen, and satellites generally are big enough to be seen by the ground-based tracking stations. So we do have a good idea of where everything is up there. It's not as crowded as it sounds like it is, because orbits can be anywhere from 200 kilometers above Earth's surface to 37,000 kilometers above Earth's orbit, or above Earth's surface, I should say. So it's not as crowded as it kind of sounds. And Das, I see your message about battery check. We are good. We have 156 minutes of battery life remaining. So not Thunderdome up there, but everything is tracked very carefully. And in fact, last week when Rocket Lab was attempting to launch its mission, its 10th flight, running out of fingers from New Zealand, they actually had to delay their first launch attempt by, I believe it was about 30 minutes, because there was something in orbit that they would come close to hitting if they launched at the opening of their launch window. So there are launches that do have to move around and wiggle around a little bit so that they don't come close to hitting something else in orbit. But those are usually pretty rare and far between. Most launches do go fairly quickly and on time, and don't have to do those collision avoidance stand downs. So that is good. If you got questions, keep throwing it into chat. Das, I need to step away just to take a drink of water since I've been talking for about 45 straight minutes now. But yeah, Das, if you could take over real quick, and then I'll be back in about 3 minutes. I'll send you a message on WhatsApp.
All right, folks, so we still have the view of the Cape here. Let's see how the delay is. All right, I'm there. Good deal. We're going to try something. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but let's see if this works, all right? Let's go ahead and mute this like that. And I'm running all the production behind the scenes. I'm juggling like 3 different computers right now to try and make this work. But let's have a look and see if we can't do this. And then also come over here. Super professional. Can you hear me now? Let's see if that works. So normally I'm sitting there muting myself so I'm not like sniffling in the background and stuff while I listen to the stream, and it really does help if you unmute your microphone. While we are standing here, we're about to get the big vent, and let's go back to the full screen. Check this out. We should be getting the big vent from the rocket right now. I do see some ventage coming off the side. Let's see. And we're going to listen and make sure that we don't talk over Chris. Yes, we did just switch back to the main camera to get that big vent. That is the T-20 big vent that's happening. And I'm sure Chris sees that happening as well. Sorry about the slight audio issue there. That's why we're testing these things, right? All right. Ventage? Yeah, I don't know about ventage. I don't think it's actually called a ventage. Yeah. But again, we're standing by for Chris Gebhardt down at the Cape to come back onto the camera. We'll keep looking at the video of this vent here. And again, that's a nominal thing. We usually expect that around T-minus 20 minutes. And at T-minus 20 minutes, they're boiling off. They're not boiling off. They're actually releasing some of the, I guess that's going to be oxidizer from the lines, right? That's not going to be fuel that they're venting out. That's going to be oxidizer. So it's the LOX vent at T-minus 20 minutes there. So, all right. Good deal. Again, thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to try this one more time. Look, let's try this one more time and see if we're not muted. And again, I'm also going to have to make sure that we're ready for Chris to come back as well. So let's see here. Okay, good. Yeah, hey, Chris is back. I just got the notification from Chris. So we're going to push this back over to Chris and see if we can make sure his audio is not muted.
Okay, welcome back. Sometimes when you talk, you got to take a drink of water all the time. So yeah, so I'm sure Das covered it for you, but what we're looking at right now is the big vent of gaseous oxygen at T-minus 20 minutes. That is exactly what we want to see. Started right on time, so that is perfect. We are about 17 minutes away from the launch of Falcon 9, so they should be closing out and finishing the loading of the kerosene onto the second stage and getting ready to start loading of the liquid oxygen onto the stage. Again, the countdown net has been very, very quiet, which is good. It means everything in the launch auto sequence, which is the full fueling process, getting Dragon onto internal power, and making sure that the vehicle is behaving as expected during propellant load is going well. We've heard nothing over the nets that would indicate that there's any sort of a problem, and again, upper level winds continue to look good and continue to look favorable, and we are 16 minutes away from launch. We just heard over the net that LOX load into the second stage, liquid oxygen loading, has begun right on time. So again, we are just ticking right through all the milestones as we head toward launch at 12:29 and 28 seconds this afternoon from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. If you are just joining us, I'm Chris Gebhardt. I'm the disembodied voice behind the camera right now. And I'm the assistant managing editor of NASA Spaceflight, and thank you all for joining us and participating in this live stream today. If you've got questions, go ahead and type them into the chat in YouTube and we will get them answered for you. A little bit of a programming note so you know what to expect. We will bring you the launch live with the camera we have here on the ground at the press site. And then once it gets far enough downrange and out of range from our camera, we are going to keep the live stream on but switch to the NASA visual, but I'm going to be the one still talking and walking you through the launch and what is happening. So keep sending me your questions. We should be able to see the stages separate, the first stage land on the drone ship east of Jacksonville, Florida, the second stage get to orbit, Dragon separate, and the solar arrays start to deploy. So that's our plan for all of you. We wanted to make this as smooth and seamless as possible, so if you are with us watching this stream, you don't have to switch back and forth between other streams if you don't want to. So keep your questions coming. As we get down toward the business end of the countdown, we'll have the LaunchNet audio for you to listen to as well as we head into liftoff. So another question we have here, why does the International Space Station orbit 150 miles up instead of higher or lower, and why was that established? So that's a good question. So the space station's orbit right now, I tend to think in kilometers, so apologies for that if you're not familiar with kilometers. So the station currently orbits in about a 410 kilometer orbit, a roughly circular orbit. That was actually lower. It was about 350 kilometers there when it was being constructed because of the massive payload weights for these modules and truss elements and solar arrays that the space shuttles had to bring up to it, and the space shuttles were a little bit limited in how high up they could go with such a heavy payload. So the station actually orbited a bit lower during its construction phase, and then after the shuttles finished constructing it and the space shuttles were retired, they raised the orbit of the station up to 410 kilometers, which is its primary operational altitude. It can be boosted up a little higher or a little lower, but 410 is kind of the sweet spot of where NASA wants it to be, because the station isn't just an interior research platform with experiments that go on inside the station. There are also a lot of external experiments on the station, a lot of Earth observation experiments that look back down at our planet, and 410 kilometers up is the sweet spot for those particular experiments. So that is why the space station is at the altitude it is. Now, there's part of your question that you actually didn't ask, but there's a good part of this is, why is the space station in a 51.6 degree inclination orbit? That's weirdly specific, right? 51.6. Why not 51? Why not 52? And it has nothing to do with the United States side of the space station and everything to do with the Russian side. So launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, where the first module of the International Space Station was launched from, where Russia launches all of its cargo missions, where all of the current crew rotation flights launch from, they launch from Kazakhstan. And you can't go due east from Kazakhstan without flying over China and Mongolia. And Russia did not want to be flying over foreign countries in the event of a launch mishap. They didn't want that particular liability, so they designed the launch profiles, and this goes back to the Russian space station Mir as well, that they launch to a 51.6 degree inclination orbit because that's the lowest inclination orbit they can launch to, and only fly over Kazakhstan and Russia and completely avoid Mongolia and China. So that gets us 51.6 degrees for the orbital inclination of the station, which is what we're launching into here today. Another question, any word on new weather balloon data? No word on other weather balloon data, and that's a good thing. The weather balloon data was all good and acceptable about an hour and 20 minutes before launch, and there's been no word that the new weather balloon data points coming in have changed that. So right now we're still go and pressing forward to a launch in about 11 minutes from now. Yesterday, did they get this close yesterday? No, they did not. They got to about an hour before liftoff yesterday and called it off. They didn't even want to attempt fueling yesterday. The upper level winds were way higher than predicted. The prediction said no wind shear, but there was wind shear. The winds were really high at the recovery site for the booster in the Atlantic. So they just decided yesterday wasn't even worth attempting to fuel. And SpaceX is a company that if there's even a small chance of getting a window in the weather, they will fuel and they will go. So that kind of tells you how bad things were yesterday. I understand everyone was really bummed yesterday when it scrubbed, but you know, you don't mess with the weather at all, because the weather can really get you, and those upper level winds are fierce, and you don't want to lose a mission because you didn't listen to the weather. The U.S. has learned that lesson very, very painfully of what happens when you fly rockets in weather conditions that they are not built to withstand, and that memory casts a long shadow, especially here over the Kennedy Space Center and the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And we just don't mess with the weather. If the weather's not right, we stand down. I know it's disappointing, but that's definitely a rather safe than sorry type situation. So again, guys, if you've got questions, keep them coming. Keep them coming to us. We are on site here at the Kennedy Space Center, right by, well, about 200 feet away from the countdown clock. And we are looking live at Launch Complex 40 here at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station side of the range here. And you are looking at the Falcon 9 rocket as it is fueling up for launch. For those of you just joining us, the fueling process is going very smoothly. They are done with fueling of the RP1 kerosene onto the second stage, and they are continuing to load liquid oxygen into both the first and second stages and RP1 kerosene into the first stage as well. So if you've got questions, give them to us, even if you don't, even if you're nervous or shy about asking. There really is no bad question about rockets. Each rocket is different, right? So an answer that applies to one rocket might not be the same for another rocket or another mission. So if you've got questions, ask. Even if you think it might have been asked before, ask it again. You know, there are always new people joining these feeds, so we're here to we're here to answer your questions. So if you've got them, go ahead and send them on over to us. Yeah, Das, if you could take it away for a few minutes, I'm just going to step away real quick, and then we'll come back for the final push to launch.
All right, folks, so like Chris just said, we are standing by for launch just over 8 minutes away from the launch window opening here for CRS-19. Again, it's the live feed down from the Cape. I'm Das whenever Chris says, hey, Das, take it away. That is what we are standing by for. Everything looks like it's ticking along, and it looks like, well, we may be in. I do appreciate all the questions that have been coming through chat today. I have been trying to pass those questions forward to Chris. It is definitely really awesome that people are able to watch a stream like this and ask some questions. It's almost like the TV can talk back to you, right? That's sort of the superpower we have here when we're doing the live stream. So I'm going to do this one more time, and I'm going to see where are people watching from right now. We're getting up on 5,000 people. Where are people watching from right now? I'm just so curious to see where people from all over the world are watching. We got Ohio in there. That was the first one. Who is it? Jupiter, Florida. Jersey's in there. Wales, Houston, Texas. Hey, Popsky. Lansing, Michigan. Wow, I can't read that. Malaysia, California, Kentucky, Egypt, France. Look at that. We're down to 7 minutes, and there are people all over the world watching the live stream here. Again, we're NASA Spaceflight. You can find us on nasaspaceflight.com. We've got forums over there with live updates and stuff like that. We've got articles that have official information about what's going on. There's actually a subscriber area called Level 2 where you can get access to behind-the-scenes pictures and information and stuff like that. And then we're doing live streams like this as well. This is sort of a new thing for us, and we really do appreciate y'all hanging out and sharing this. So it looks like we just got an update that the engine chill has started ahead of the launch, coming up on just over 6 minutes, it looks like. And look at that scroll keeps happening. I'm not even going to apologize. Hey, look at that. I caught that question in there. Adam Watley asks, what are the towers surrounding the launch site? Those are lightning catenaries. So down there in Florida, you got thunderstorms, you got a lot of energy up in the atmosphere, and that comes out in the form of lightning sometimes. And you don't want the lightning to strike your large metal rod that's filled with fuel. You actually want to ground that out. So those are lightning catenaries. Great question. I'm going to toss it back to Chris again, and he is ready to go.
All right, so we are about 6 minutes away from our anticipated liftoff here at 12:29 and 28 seconds. Engine chill down has begun, so all that cold liquid oxygen that they have pumped into the first stage, they are now slowly draining into the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the Falcon 9, thermally conditioning those engines so they are not cold shocked at ignition. Very, very important process to go for. So that is in work right now. I also have the launch countdown up so that you guys will be able to hear it as I do. But this is exciting. It's always exciting. We're into the real business end of the countdown now, as all the final fueling preps are closed out and the vehicle is configured for flight. So if you do have questions left at this point, keep putting them in chat. We're going to take a quick break from answering.
Pressing for strongback retract.
So some of the tanks are pressurizing for the retract of the transporter erector, that large structure that provides fuel and data and umbilical line connections to the second stage and helps roll the rocket out and get it vertical on the pad. So the next main event will be the the retract of that transporter erector from 90 degrees to 88.5 degrees. Very, very small pullback. And then at T0, when Falcon 9 actually lifts off, it will do its throwback maneuver, where it will throw back to about 45 degrees here. But again, what I was saying is if you've got questions, keep putting them in chat, and we will answer them, as many as we can, during the launch phase of the mission as well, when the net's a little bit quiet. But yeah, but we are just under 4 minutes now, 4 minutes to go until the launch of Falcon 9, CRS-19, this Dragon's third flight up to the International Space Station. Again, we are live here at Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center, bringing this to you from about 4 miles away from the launch pad. And you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay with us for the entirety of the launch, not just what we'll see with this camera, but the other feeds as well. So this is one-stop shopping for you guys. And you can actually see that the transporter erector did pull back there to its 88.5 degree pre-launch position. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to listen to the net and the countdown audio. It will be quiet for a while, but we're going to do that and take it through to launch.
Closed out.
They have finished liquid oxygen loading on the first stage. Come on, baby. Come on, baby.
G2 also closed out.
So they've finished LOX loading, or liquid oxygen loading on the second stage.
Gas closeouts are starting.
That call means that the ground gas closeouts have started, so they're purging everything on the transporter erector, getting it ready for launch. The white vapor you're seeing is gaseous oxygen venting out of the first stage tank. That's normal.
Falcon 9's in startup. Dragon is in startup. Go for launch.
30 seconds and counting.
Minutes, 30 seconds. That's 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff. Vehicle is pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal. engine chill.
Alright guys, so I know the NASA TV feed you are watching right now is delayed by about 30 seconds. We have had successful stage separation, ignition of the second stage, and boost back burn on the first stage. That boost back burn on the first stage is not to bring it back to the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. It is to slow it down so it can land on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, positioned about 185 nautical miles east of Jacksonville, Florida. That boost back burn is done, and Falcon 9 is on its way back to Earth while the second stage continues to fire normally and nominally to take Dragon into orbit. We have had right now a successful liftoff and first stage flight of the Falcon 9 from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station here in Florida. Stage 2 is on a nominal trajectory. Again, I know guys, it's about a 30-second delay. We have good acquisition of communication signal from the Bermuda tracking station of the second stage. I mean, it was an absolutely gorgeous launch of the Falcon 9 today. A totally cloudless sky, that 20% chance of a thick cloud wall violation, I mean, didn't materialize at all. There's no cloud anywhere like in the sky here. Absolutely gorgeous day. So right now what is happening is the first stage is falling back to Earth on its way to the drone ship. The next thing it will do is its entry burn to help thermally stabilize it and slow it down as it comes back into the dense lower atmosphere. The second stage is continuing on to orbit, firing nominally, just as we want that single Merlin vacuum optimized engine. SpaceX confirming a nominal trajectory of that second stage to bring Dragon to orbit. Always exciting. As someone was asking earlier what it's like to watch a rocket launch, it's always amazing and indescribable in some ways because all of them are different from one another. No matter how many Falcon 9s you've seen launch, they're all different. And this was, again, just absolutely amazing and perfect performance from the first stage and perfect performance from the second stage at this time. Just absolutely gorgeous. So what we're waiting to hear now is that the entry burn has started on the first stage. We're continuing to hear call outs that the second stage is continuing onward to orbit. As always awesome as it is to pay really close attention to the first stage as it comes back in for a landing, in this case on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. Remember that our primary mission is Dragon. It is to get Dragon into orbit. So keep that in mind as we
continues on nominal trajectory.
As we watch and cheer as the first stage comes back in for recovery. Second stage continuing to follow that normal trajectory. Very important call outs that you keep hearing there over the net.
So at this point, as we stand by for the second... Stage 1 entry burn has started. So stage 1 is re-entering the atmosphere, slowing down using 3 of its 9 Merlin engines to slow down again. There's a little bit of a delay, so you'll see it in a few minutes, and stage 1 entry burn has ended and shut down. Stage 1 is on its way to the drone ship for a landing in about a minute from now, about 2 minutes away from Dragon entering orbit on the Falcon 9 second stage as well. Everything going very, very well. Now we just wait to see if they can stick the landing, and if stage 2 can get Dragon into its proper orbit. As much nerves as you feel here on the ground before, as much nerves as you feel here on the ground in the lead up to launch, now that we're at the business end of the launch phase, this is another moment where nerves start setting in. The drone ship has acquisition of signal from the first stage. The first stage is now traveling below the speed of sound. That landing burn should start momentarily.
Stage 1 landing burn has started.
Landing burn has started. Standing by to hear if it lands.
Stage 1 landing legs have deployed.
Stage 1 landing legs are down. Coming in for the landing.
Stage 1 has landed.
Stage 1 has landed. Got another one on the drone ship. As good as that is, pay attention. The second stage is still firing, still taking Dragon to orbit. That is the primary purpose of our mission. It's good to have a booster back for reuse, but keep that eye on the second stage as Dragon keeps on going into orbit. Again, you'll be seeing it in a minute, but we had a successful landing of the Falcon 9 on the drone ship. And we're just now waiting to hear that stage 2 has shut down and Dragon has separated from the top of the second stage. So far, picture perfect launch operation once again of the Falcon 9, but waiting to hear that Dragon is in orbit successfully.
MVAC shut down.
The Merlin MVAC engine has shut down. The stage has shut down on time. Standing by for spacecraft SEP.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Nominal orbit insertion confirmed. Dragon's in orbit.
Dragon separation.
And Dragon is separated. There we go. That is a successful launch. Another successful launch for the Falcon 9. Dragon's in orbit. First stage did its job and will now perform a 6.5-hour propellant conditioning test on orbit. But Dragon's in orbit, on its way to the International Space Station. That's what we wanted to see today, first and foremost. The first stage is on the drone ship east of Jacksonville, Florida. Just an absolutely tremendous launch and success again for SpaceX. Next up, very quickly, will be the solar array deployment. Solar array deployment for Dragon, which should be coming up here in just a few minutes. Just a few minutes from now. Getting those solar arrays deployed is what allows Dragon to be power positive and to start harnessing that energy from the sun and not running off of its batteries, which it has been launching, or which it has been running off of since about 10 minutes before launch, when it went on to internal power. So amazing. It's always an amazing day. Always, always, always amazing. So to everyone out there, thank you so much. If you've got questions, you can, if there are any more questions in their DOS, let me know. I'm happy to answer them for you before we end our live stream. But again, just to recap, a wonderfully successful launch of the Falcon 9 from Slick 40, which is right behind me there. You can zoom in a little bit. You can zoom in a little bit later, but you can see that the TE is still venting, which is normal, and everything as it goes through its post-launch safing and securing. But an absolutely gorgeous and successful launch of Falcon 9. The first stage is on the drone ship. Dragon is in orbit. The second stage is onward to its 6.5-hour propellant thermal conditioning test. So we're just waiting to hear now that Dragon solar arrays have deployed. That's the last major or the next major milestone, I should say, but all of the launch milestones are complete at this time, and that is a mission success for the Falcon 9 and for SpaceX today on the launch front. So I'm not seeing any questions. I'm not seeing DOS typing to me. So I'm assuming we are good. Thank you so much for joining us for our live stream today. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't, and make sure to hit that notification button so you're alerted whenever we do live streams. We don't just cover launches. Yesterday we were at the Atlas V Starliner pad, giving you a tour of that vehicle. We were at the Falcon pad yesterday as well, doing the same. And thank you again. Head on over to NASAspaceflight.com as well. Check out our site, not just the news site, but also the forum discussion site. And of course, if you really want, you can help us out by joining our subscription service, L2, which gets you access to a lot of extra goodies that we don't always talk about, or that we don't talk about for a few days. So there's some good stuff on there if you want. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor of NASA Spaceflight. Thank you for that, and we just got confirmation that Dragon solar arrays are deploying. So that's perfect timing. Thank you again, great launch, and we will see you back here for...
Successfully primed, and all thrusters are ready for firing.
Also, all the thrusters are ready to fire for Dragon, so all is going really, really good. Again, thank you for joining us. Our next live stream right now, as planned, will be the launch of JCSat-18, another Falcon 9 mission on the 15th of December, followed very shortly thereafter by the launch of Starliner's orbital flight test from Slick 41, which is just off screen here on December 19th at 6:59 a.m. We will bring both of those launches to you when they happen. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
All right, folks, we're going to cut Chris loose here. Let me send him a message letting him know, saying, "You're clear." I think that's what they say. Again, I'm DOS. I'm back here in the studio, and I'm going to try another thing. Let's see if we can't do a replay of that launch. This is the first time we've tried this, but I've got the video queued up, and let's see if we can watch a replay of what we just saw. That successful launch, spacecraft separation, solar panels deployed, everything's looking good for CRS-19 from SpaceX here.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Engines ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and cargo Dragon, transporting critical research to enable living and working in Earth orbit and in deep space.
Vehicle supersonic. Vehicle has reached maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Right?
A couple big calls.
Oh my god!
Normal, all nominal, and progressing as expected, flying through the densest part of the atmosphere.
Recovery AOS.
Those are just great views. I love that plume expansion there where the exhaust plume starts to spread out because the atmosphere is so thin. It's my favorite part of the launch is when the plume starts to expand.
Call for chilling the second stage engine.
I'm weird, I guess. Again, this is a replay of the launch. Successful launch has already occurred, and we're rolling back the clock a little bit here to play the launch one more time. This is actually the feed that NASA displayed during the launch. And look at that plume expansion. 9 of the engine just spreading out. Not enough room for all the energy that they're pushing out to push this rocket into orbit. Again, y'all, thank you so much for joining us here today. Like I said, that was Chris Gebhardt down at Cape Canaveral. I'm Das, running the studio back here. I'm actually in Charlotte, North Carolina, and through the wonders of modern technology, we're able to go through this stuff. I had one more thing that I wanted to show. You may be a spaceflight fan. You want to keep up with stuff in the meantime. I know it's going to be like super sellout mode, right? Not really. It's nasaspaceflight.com. If you go over to the website, this is actually the article where you can read about CRS-19. There's also a forum thread as well over in the forums. They actually do live updates, so you can keep track of things. Maybe you're not on Twitter or something like that. Maybe that audio shouldn't still be playing in the background, all right? Let's go ahead and turn that audio off.
So very significant calls there.
Like that. All right. And there's also another way that you can follow. You can follow them on Twitter as well. There's lots of professional photographers that are out there with NASA spaceflight. Nathan Barker is one of them here. Got some views from the Cape yesterday. That, of course, is the NASA Vehicle Assembly Building. Brady Kinniston's out there as well. This was a sunrise launch from yesterday, I believe, or sunrise photo from yesterday. Brady takes lots of awesome pictures in there. This is from the pad visit that they had. We also got Mike Deep out there for NASA spaceflight. So again, I'm going to post some of these links into chat if you want to toss some follows over to the photographers. Also follow NASA spaceflight as well. I'll put all the links in chat so you can follow and keep along. I also saw one more question. I'm going to just do this really quickly. People are wondering where the camera was earlier, right? So the camera was actually situated over here near the turning basin. This is the NASA press site, right? And that camera from the NSF live stream was about 4.3 miles away from SLC-40. The launch happened from SLC-40 right here, and up here at the turning basin, it was right near the countdown clock is where that was. So I figured see if we could put that map up on the screen and let you know real quick. But what we're going to do now is next time make me sit up a little bit higher on the... Oh, I cut my head off. Let's not do that. Sit up a little bit higher on the screen and say goodbye. We really do appreciate you joining us for the live stream of SpaceX's CRS-19 commercial resupply mission up to the International Space Station. Again, we're NASA Spaceflight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Is that what we're supposed to say on YouTube? Anyway, something like that. We really appreciate people hanging out, sharing the launch with us, and we will see you next time. For now, NASA Spaceflight's signing off for today.